Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We finished up to here, establishing the self. Remember that? In the last section? Okay. So, therefore, commit yourself to karma yoga. It is discretion in action. Okay. Now, the important statement here is the next one. Having given up the results of action, the wise free themselves from bondage of birth and death. Okay, so let's just stop at this statement. Having given up the results of actions. Now the question is, why would the wise give up results of actions? What would be the cause, or what understanding would a wise person have that would cause them to give up expectations of how the results of their karma is to occur? What would be the possible reason out of everything that we have discussed so far? And the answer is, if, let's say, for example, a worldly person, the typical way is to expect something. That is just, we can take the opposite. And if I, for example, perform a karma, then there is an inherent expectation of karma phala, of the fruits of my action. So this is a little bit of a problem, because we have a situation whereby the variables of the action are always out of our control, if you think about it. How many variables are interconnected that we completely do not have any sort of ownership of, which we are ultimately dependent on? So that means that if I depend on karma phala, that is the result of my action, then that's likely going to result in a fourfold. For example, let's say that I want to cross the street and catch a bus. So I cross the street and I catch the bus. So my expectation and what I've gotten is equal. I've caught the bus. Let's say I cross the street and I miss the bus. What I expected, I've now gotten less of. I've gotten less. The first one I've gotten equal, now I've gotten less than what I expected. Or I cross the street and a friend shows up with a nice sports car and goes, hey, get in. So that means I've gotten more than I expected. Or I want to cross the street, I slip on a banana peel, crack my head, and end up in hospital. So that means I've gotten opposite to what I expected. So that means equal, minus, more, or opposite. These four variables is what we're up against all the time if we choose to put our results or our expectations into the results of our actions. And would, by the virtue of this little experiment, would that produce permanent satisfaction? Or can that produce permanent satisfaction, knowing that there's always four variables up against us? No. So that means sometimes I get some, sometimes I don't. So there is no possible stability in this kind of expectation of expecting results of my actions to occur in accordance to my likes and dislikes. So that's why it says here, having given up the results of action, the wise free themselves from the bondage of birth and death. Because let's say I do not give up the results of my actions. Then what happens? For example, let's say I put money in the stock market. That's a karma. That's where free will is, your action. We've already established that. So I can put as much money as I want into the stock market. But as soon as you do, from that moment on, it's out of your hands. Think about how many variables possibly is occurring in any moment of time that is completely out of your control. That's where we do not have any control. That's where you have to surrender. So that means free will comes in your action. I can go left, I can go right, I can come here, I can go over there, but anything that happens after the action, that is totally out of your hands. So the karma phala is therefore left to the field called Ishvara, not to my expectations, knowing now that these four variables are operating in any one moment. Okay, so this also brings up another question is, if you think about a traditional way of, let's say, lack of knowledge way of going about the world before education, basically when we want something, there's always three possibilities. We desire to get something, we desire to hold on to what we've gotten, and we desire to get rid of something of what we have gotten. Is there any other choice? Desire to get something, desire to hold on to what I've gotten, and desire to get rid of 1 and 2, what I've got. So that means we have to now redefine what success means, because if we want to talk about success, living a successful life, how much sense does it make to put success, the word success, into not only these four variables, but into these three possibilities where we're always desiring something, retaining what we've gotten, and trying to get rid of what we've gotten? Can that be called success? No, because that's always dependent. The mind's always changing, our tastes are always changing, our preferences are always changing. So the 1, 2, and 3 is always going to change. So that means by the time I said I'm successful, by tomorrow my tastes have already changed, so that's already erased the success I've had yesterday. So then I end up chasing for another success to get something new, to retain what I've gotten, or to get rid of something that I've already gotten before. So this produces this wheel called samsara, an endless cycle, because these variables never end. So that means that the word success has to be redefined. And so how do we now redefine success according to this teaching? Okay, so we say that success is the ability or the capacity to handle realities. So what does realities mean? Think about it. Realities means anything that happens in the moment. Reality with our spouse, reality with our friend, reality at our colleague in a workplace, reality in reading a piece of material like an Upanishad. So success is the ability to handle realities as they occur moment to moment. How? That's the question. Handle them how? Objectively and dispassionately. So what does this mean? To handle realities dispassionately and objectively. Well, let's go back to the first statement. It says, having given up the results of action. Does that imply a subjective attitude or an objective attitude? Because subjective means there is an expectation, there's a personal expectation. Objective means that I am able to look at it as it is versus how I would want it to be. See the difference? So success, therefore, is the capacity to handle realities ongoingly as they occur, moment to moment, objectively and dispassionately, which causes an automatic change of attitude. Why? Because if I'm no longer subjectively invested in the stock market, that means once I put an action into the field and I'm no longer expecting a result based on my like and my dislike, then no matter what happens, would that affect me as much as it would if I put all of my subjective, all of my investment into it? My energy, my time, my effort, my expectation? No, it wouldn't. Why? Because I've looked at it objectively. So success is handling, or the capacity to handle, realities objectively and dispassionately. What does the word dispassionately mean? It means that if we take the opposite, what is a traditional method of going to a stock? Let's go to Wall Street, for example. And you look at everyone's just shouting, they're all about what's going to happen, big eyes on these big boards, and they're just so invested into what's going to occur. They're so passionate, full of energy. Isn't that the case in any workplace? There's so much energy into it. So there's passion there. But here we say dispassionately. So what does this mean? Does this mean that I'm just going to leave put my funds into a stock and then just walk away because I'm not? No, it doesn't mean that. It means I'm being objective about it. There's passion, but it's not passion whereby I'm investing my whole life into it. It's in other words, there's an objective view towards that which is occurring in my life or in your life. See the difference? Dispassionate versus passionate. We're not saying dispassionate means just dead or just low, lethargic. We just mean fully invested in life, but not taking it so seriously. Knowing now that you got 4 variables up against you, that it may not turn out the way we want it. And so by that virtue, it's not reasonable to put absolute expectation into how things are to happen according to my likes and dislikes. What's so special about my likes and dislikes? What about somebody else's likes and dislikes? I want the market to go up, somebody else wants the market to go down. How are my priorities any better than theirs? This is called dispassionate and objective view towards not only our own situations in our life, but also towards others. Because if it's subjective, then what happens? Then it becomes personal. Then there's an investment to offer, to kind of impose my advice onto somebody else. Versus if I'm able to listen, or you're able to objectively see what is instead of how I would want it to be, then guess what? Clarity ensues. That means clarity ensues comes when I'm able to be objective and dispassionate. Okay. How do we go about understanding this objectivity? That's the question, because now we're on the word objectivity. How do we go about that? We go about that by understanding the mechanics of means and end. So what does this mean? That means what I do and what happens based on what I've done. Means and end. Sadhana, sambandha. These are 2 very common words in Vedanta. Sadhana means what I employ in order to get something. That means what action. Sadhana means a means, that is a way to get something. And the action from, the result from the action, which is sambandha. So means and end. So now, knowing that I can put my action into the stock market, I can't choose which stock to invest to, but I have no control about the end. Right? I don't know what's going to happen. There's no way. So what does that mean? The end is entirely out of your control. That's the point. So that means that we have to now ask the question, if I'm not in control of the end, not the means, but the end. You see the distinction? Yes, there is free will, but after I do what I do, from that moment on, it's out of your control. There is some control, but it's not entirely in your control. So that's what we mean. We don't say there's no free will, just to make that clear. Okay, so that means that the end is out of our control. So then who is the one that creates the end? Well, it has to be a giver of the end. It has to be someone that gives the end. For example, I employ the means of turning on the kettle, free will. But then what happens afterwards? That's given. The boiling, the effect is given. But I have no control over that, do I? Because the boiling water there can be a short circuit, there can be a little explosion, the water can boil. It's totally out of our hands. So that means the end is given. What else is given? Or let's just say the example of the kettle. Think about how many other variables the kettle depends on. It depends on electricity. The electricity is given. Think about, where does electricity come from? From the big, coal factories, not factories, what are they called? The industrial, huh? From the big power stations. That's given. Who creates the metal, the poles and all the generators? That's given. Where does all that metal come from? From those truck drivers who delivered the raw resources to the processing factories. That's given. Where do the tires come from? And the driver who actually delivered all of that. That's also given. Where do the raw materials come from? From the earth. That's given. Where does the air for the truck driver or the person to turn on the kettle, where does that come from? That's given. Where does your capacity to even contemplate this conversation, where does that come from? That's also given. Where does your ability, what happens when you open your eyes? Sight. That's given. What happens, how do you use the mind, the brain, to contemplate existential questions? Where does that facility or capability come from? That's also given. What about your body? Given. Just pops out of the womb. Given. Where do the laws come from? Gravity, physics. Given. What about the fact that we're all, that we can plant a tree? Action. I planted the tree. Action. But who sustains the tree? The rotation of the earth. Given. In order to contact the light of the sun, so that the tree can experience photosynthesis. Given. Where does the sun come from? 70% hydrogen, 28% helium. Also given. Gravity, orientation, everything is given. By whom? That's the question. Okay, everything's given. By whom? Now think about it this way. So that means everything is given from the smallest to the largest. Even a white blood cell in your body, given. So that means no matter how small of a complexity or how big of a complexity, it is given. And it is what? Intelligence. Think about how much intelligence there is in a single white blood cell or a red blood cell. So that means no matter how small we go, intelligence. How big we want to think, intelligence. When we put all of these mechanics together, intelligence. Given. You put your body, your limbs together, your fingers together, your hair together, everything's working together, all intelligence, given. So now, who is that one that gives? So we call that one Ishvara. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to start using the word Ishvara more and more, and Ishvara 2 and 1 less and less, because Ishvara 1 and 2 is not part of traditional Vedanta. We would usually just call it consciousness and Ishvara. Ishvara is the Jagat Karanam, the cause of the world, and consciousness is Brahman. So there's just a little side note. So my job is just to remove these prerequisites and then start to add more in line with the traditional teaching. Okay, so who is that one that gives? Ishvara. So this is what Karma Yoga is about. Surrendering to that one that gives everything. Nothing's yours. Everything that we depend on, every small thing that we depend on, completely given by this intelligence. So why not surrender to this intelligence? If the one that's surrendering is also of that same intelligence. So that means that Ishvara, our refuge, is the one who is to lead us to the end. That one, when it comes to moksha, is there to be prayed, to be devoted to ask for help. That's what karma yoga is. Asking for help of that intelligence that is given you everything. Why not ask of that intelligence in a form of prayer, in a form of worship, puja?
So your decision to invest and go, it's up to the field, up to Ishvara. Is that a given? It is and it isn't a given that you choose to invest, or you choose to which companies or whatever.
Well,
are they given part of the whole given as well?
Yeah, you mean
because it's free will that you're choosing to.
Yeah, because sure, so you got action. Just like we said, we got action. I can turn on the kettle, but afterwards, once I turn on the kettle, I've got really no control. So does that mean that I'm going to stop turning on the kettle? It doesn't, because see, yes and no at the same time. Because yes, I've applied action, but if I don't apply action, then nothing's going to happen. It's just like, for example, a marathon runner who is up against, let's say, 20 other runners. So is it fair for the marathon runner to say, there's like, who am I? I'm just a small person. There's all these other runners out there. So why should I participate? It doesn't work like that. That means you can only do what you can do, but once you have done what you've done, that's out of your hands. So that means you can increase your chances. You see? That's the distinction. So yes, you can do, but by doing, I increase the chances as opposed to if I don't do. Because if I don't do, everything stays the same. But if I do, then what am I saying? This is what I want. So what do I want? It depends. Whatever is important for you. You can want material. You can want health. You can want better relationships. You can want knowledge. So it's all up to you. So that means just by asking, praying, you're increasing the chance by asking that intelligence, which has already given you everything. And if you think about it, everything in your life already, you have been given. So why not make use of that knowledge, that power, which has already given you everything? That's the point. See, we don't use this. Ishvara is everything, and yet we don't ask that which is everything right here, right now. We don't ask for help, and yet it has given us everything already. Power of prayer, part of karma yoga, devotion, surrendering to that intelligence. That's where this is leading to. Okay, so now we can nicely go into a karma yoga summary and ask, what is karma yoga? So karma yoga is the fundamental qualification for knowledge yoga. Knowledge yoga is Jnana Yoga. Okay, so why would it be the fundamental qualification for knowledge yoga? It's very simple, because it's, if you want to simplify it, it's just a means to purify the mind. We already discussed this. It's a means to purify the mind, because if there is an action that is based on a like and dislike, and my motivation is off the like and dislike, then what does that cause? A disturbed mind. Because I have no idea, I inherently know that I'm not potentially going to get what I expect. So like in the stock market, I have a like to make a big hit. So then now I go home, and there's a thought about what I would like to have happen. So now you collect all of these thoughts, one over here, one at the stock market, one at the wife, one at the friend, one at the car company, one at the employee. All of these thoughts end up creating a lot of ripples in the mind. Why? because of expectations of how we want things to happen. So that means karma yoga is surrendering the results of our actions to that one who is the giver of laws of everything that we experience and use every day to learn, to cognize with the world. Okay, so what is karma yoga? Okay, now this is just a preliminary introduction because chapter 3 is the beginning of karma yoga, so I'll just go through a very basics one. Okay, so right action and right attitude. So let's go back to that first statement when we said success is handling, the capacity to handle realities in an objective and dispassionate way. So let's tie that in with this. So that means if we objectively and dispassionately accept or transact with the world, that's what's going to do automatically. Change the attitude. You see, the usual way of thinking is we want to change the attitude just for the sake of changing the attitude. It doesn't work like that. Because attitude is a what? A result of an understanding. Isn't that the case? When you understand something, then your attitude automatically changes. If I understand that everything is given, then my attitude now automatically changes to one of surrender. So that means understanding that the lawgiver is the one who provides us the results of our actions. I understand that. You understand that. That leads to a natural change of attitude. And what does the attitude do? It produces the right action. That's why we say karma yoga is the right attitude and right action. So that means understanding reality as the whole, everything is Ishvara. And I can surrender safely to that intelligence. Changes the attitude, changes the action. Not the other way around. Because it doesn't work by adopting certain mandates, I shall and I shall not, and then trying to play out those. It doesn't work like that. We need to go to the root cause, and that automatically changes the effects. So now we know the purpose of karma yoga, to help us to understand how beautiful and vast Ishvara is. And as a result of that, there's no problem. You can surrender any day. And when you do, then things become so much easier. Then there is no need to take ownership of the world, which is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it become quite painful to try to own things and control things all the time. You know that one? It's like total control freaks some of us in the West. I mean, it happens all over the world. Why? Because we don't trust that giver. So we need to surrender that sense of control. Okay, so worshipping the field with your action, time, energy, and money. So what this means is we're not talking now about charity and go and give all of your stuff. This is not what we're saying. We're just saying worship. What does worship mean? Devote your time, energy, effort to those things that are meaningful for you. For example, parents. Worshipping parents. Why not? How are they different from Ishvara? See, a lot of us, we have these statues like Krishna and Vishnu and Jesus and Muhammad and there's nothing there. It's just like a dry figure for some of us. Why not just take something that is meaningful for you? That's one way to worship. For me, it's parents. I worship my parents. I have no greater emotion than when I see my parents. So I don't need to worship Jesus or Buddha or all these. So that means whatever is meaningful for you, that's what we worship. Now, why? Why should I worship? All right, that's a question. Well, what do we say about Ishvara? There is no place where Ishvara is not. So that means I can worship this if I want. How is this different from anything else? As long as it has an emotional connection for you, that's what to worship. You see, okay, why should we worship? Because it keeps the mind focused on Ishvara, since everything is Ishvara. If I don't worship, guess what? I'm still worshiping. You know why? Because everything is Ishvara. But I am worshiping lesser, quote, lesser forms, like, world, sensual, great. Nothing wrong with this, by the way. I'm just saying that why not worship something that is of a higher nature, a higher ideal, that constantly reminds us of Ishvara, the one that blesses us with phala. So that means worshiping anything that is meaningful for you. You can even worship, pets or nature. We have, nature lovers, tree huggers, all that stuff. Okay. This is living dharma, responding to the needs of the environment. So what is Ishvara? Very simple. Ishvara is your environment. Very simple. That's it. You don't need to go big or small. Just, this is it. This is Ishvara, your environment. And it says worship or living dharma, that means living according to the nature to respond according to the needs of the environment. It's got nothing to do with passion, finding your passion. This is different. It doesn't matter what you do, by the way. We can have a janitor, we can have a CEO, we can have a butcher, because, see, a butcher sounds like a violation of himsa, right? Injury. No. Because Ishvara assigned that job. See, as long as it's done out of just a genuine interest, there's nothing wrong with it. So it all depends on the context. Or how about a surgeon who needs to operate on a patient? That sounds like himsa, injury. It's not. Why? Because the intention is different. The intention is to save one's life. Similarly, when our intention changes, so does the attitude and the action automatically. So we need to know what is our intention. All right. So this is living dharma. Okay, so karma yoga is dharma yoga. You know why? Okay, so karma means action, implying free will. And dharma, let's just say it's how to live in accordance or in harmony with nature. Let me ask you a question. If a lion kills an antelope for food, do we arrest the lion? No. Why? Because we inherently know the lion had no choice. But if a person kills a human, what do? We have certain thoughts around that. Why? Because we inherently know that person could have done something differently. We know they could have. So we then projections or whatever it is, thoughts. So that means the privilege of free will gives you the responsibility of preserving and maintaining dharma. There's no greater privilege than free will. But automatically with free will now comes preserving and maintaining harmony with nature. Why? Because you have choice. So that is our privilege. It can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. Depends on how we use our free will. So that's why we get educated, so we know to what to redirect our actions to. In this case, as it says, living by responding to the needs of the total. It's called compassion. There's no greater way to live than respond to the needs of the total. Okay, so for example, what does this mean, right? What does this mean to respond to the needs of the total? Well, let's just say, someone's in a rush, in a car, and you just move away and you give them away. For example, an ambulance is going. What do? We move away. Why? Because we inherently understand there's an injury somewhere, so we just give way. We respond to the environment appropriately, and everything works fine. Simple example. Versus someone, not giving way to the ambulance, and then what? Everyone just knows it's incorrect. That's a violation of Dharma. We instinctively know what is a violation of Dharma. So that's what it means to respond appropriately to the environment. Okay. It is a giving attitude, not a grabbing attitude. This is a big one, especially. It's an important point verse worth mentioning, because our usual way of, or it can be, not necessarily, of dealing with things is there's an agenda. What am I going to get out of this? Or how can I profit out of this engagement? So the problem with this is the four variables. It causes expectations, which then causes disappointment, which is what? Subjective. And we said success is being objective and dispassionate. But also it creates a sense of isolation and separateness. Because if I take from myself, what am I saying? I'm scarce. I'm small. How does that fit with the eternity? Sarvam Brahmaha. It doesn't. It's a total separation. Yeah. So this attitude of what can I give versus what can I get, it's a big one. And one way to go about this is just to simply ask, okay, I've got nothing to give. What can I give? I've got nothing. How about a smile? How about a hug? Or whatever it is. How about a conversation? Or how about an engagement of whatever sort it is? So there's always something that we can give. Yeah. Because if we take Ishvara, what is Ishvara? What did I say at the beginning? Given. Remember that word? Given. So that means by adopting the attitude of giving, you're what? Replicating the natural harmony of Ishvara. You're not becoming Ishvara. I'm not saying you're not becoming Ishvara, but you're replicating the natural harmony of Ishvara. You yourself are what? Saying, Ishvara, I understand you, I understand the whole, which is nothing but giving. And I choose to participate in that giving. We say in Vedanta, you want to move away from Jiva Srishti to Ishvara Srishti. You know what that means? You want to move away as much as possible from Jiva Srishti, that means likes and dislikes, subjective, to Ishvara Srishti, that is objective, the whole. How can I contribute to everyone? Yeah. So it's a process. It's a step-by-step process. Happens slowly. It doesn't happen overnight, because we're just sometimes trained to sort of consume versus, or what can I extract versus what can I give. Yeah. Okay, it's a giving attitude exalts the vasanas or samskaras. By the way, another point, vasanas is a certain term we use in the Chinmaya school. It's not necessarily part of Vedanta. So I'm going to start using the word samskara more often, because samskara is the original word. Okay, so that's just another note there. So it exhausts the vasanas instead of reinforcing it. So that means every time I take, what am I confirming? Oh, I could do this again. That means I've just reinforced a samskara, a tendency to repeat getting that object or that experience all over again. But if I give, guess what that does? Exhausts. So that means that if there is a habit or a particular attitude of that is unpleasant, easy way to get rid of it is just to adopt the attitude of giving, because it exhausts the actual tendency. It causes death to that tendency. But if I take, it gives birth to that tendency. Yeah. Okay. Karma Yoga takes your attention off objects and directs the attention back to yourself. So our minds, by default, tends to externalize attention. For example, kids. You see kids, they're so out They're always playing with toys and so engaging with the world, ice cream, and all of these wonderful experiences are just so fascinating. Well, adults still have a little bit of that trace in them. And that's still, you could call it the child mind. It still wants to externalize it. There's nothing wrong with it, by the way. We're just bringing it to your awareness, to your attention. That part has to mature. And maturity of that part equals extroversion to introversion. That's the result. That means less time is spent outside, that is fascinated with outside, and more time is just staying here, just within, going within, contemplation. I did not say that the world gets negated and then the world's not real, because that's another duality. Sarvam Brahmaha means everything is the whole. I just said there's an inherent understanding that these are appearances, but what is that which is unchanging? You. Witness, the consciousness. Okay? So this is not about negating the world or negating people or negating, it's all just mithya. It's not about that. That's just another mistake that we commonly make. We have to be very careful of that. So it's just about understanding everything is the whole. So let's serve the whole. All right. It's a way to channel desires to productive results. Okay, so channeling desires. So karma yoga is really just about channeling desires. So because we're always, remember those three parts, desire to obtain, desire to retain, and desire to get rid of. Those three desires are endlessly You're not going to get rid of those desires, by the way. Yeah? So the Buddhist way, we respect the Buddhist way, which says to eliminate desires. Good luck with that. We just simply say desires belong to a different order of reality. Just like your thoughts belong to the mind, but they do not belong to consciousness. So the desires completely continue. It's just that they're now channeled to the right means, which produces the right ends. Yeah. So desire is your friend. Desire gets you here. Desire gets you to read a book. Desire gets you to study. Desire gets you to stay awake. So, all right. So, it is using one's effort to purify the mind by taking the needs of one's environment into account. We just discussed this. It is giving, not a grabbing attitude. It requires sattvic karmas and enjoyment of employment. What does enjoyment of employment mean? What? Enjoying your work? Well, yeah, you could say that. It just means finding a way to make whatever you're doing enjoyable, whatever that involves. Because if I don't enjoy what I do, it's very unlikely I'm going to have an attitude of giving. Think about that. So yes, employment also matters. But we're not saying, get out of you. It's not about getting a new job or getting a new profession. It's just about discovering or rediscovering how can I turn this environment, which I'm exposed to every day in a job or a career, into something that's a lot more an expression of divinity than if I just look at it as a means to an end of making a profit. Yeah. Very easy. Because every person you deal with is Ishvara, right in front of you. What's the difference if you change? It's got nothing to do with profession. You're always dealing with Ishvara. Worship Ishvara. That means worship whomever is presented in front of you. Because it's all Ishvara. Giver. Intelligence. Yeah. All right. It's sattvic. It requires sattvic karmas and enjoyment of employment. Okay, sattvic karmas. This is okay. It's from the Gita, but it doesn't just mean sattvic, because sometimes you need to do rajasic. It depends on the situation. You see, sometimes we need to dance. Dance is not a sattvic karma. It's a rajas. It's a more of an energy. Sometimes we need to just be stable and just stubbornly listen. That's tamas. So it depends on the situation. But here it says sattvic karmas because sattvic karmas is pointing to something that is tranquil, something that establishes one's mind into serenity versus, movement and ripples. So that's why we say sattvic karmas, like meditation, pujas, worship, devotion, contemplation. All of these things are sattvic. Do you know why they bless the cow, or they treat the cow so holy in India? Think about a cow, it's so relaxed, isn't it? Huh? I've been once crossing from Tirumavalai, going back to the airport, and there's a long 8-lane line where cars will stop to give some money so they can pass on. And the cow, right in the middle of those 8 lanes, so busy, so, everyone's just beeping all the time. And the cow is just totally relaxed. I was like, oh my goodness, this is sattva personified. So, sattvic karmas, in other words, relaxing. Okay. Okay, it is knowledge that the results of actions are unpredictable, so it is not wise to rely on them for emotional satisfaction. We established this why. It is knowledge that the results of actions are unpredictable. Equal, less, more, opposite. This is just common life. So karma yoga is that knowledge that if I do put all of my expectations into my likes and dislikes, that's just a recipe for disaster or disappointment, constant. So we have to surrender that expectation, how things are to work out. That means even if we study, this knowledge, does it make sense to expect, knowledge at some point? See, you can't come here, you can't come to this place. You can go to any school. But what happens after, it's not really, it is but it isn't. It is because you made a decision, but it isn't because you don't know when. Which is kind of a paradox, because when, it implies, a dualistic notion that it's not already. We just say, are you aware right now? Yeah, so what is there to seek if you're already aware? Self is awareness. You already have what you're looking for. So there's no when to any of this, and that's the joke. That we think, when is moksha going to happen? It's not an event. I am not, I am ignorant. Well, how do you know you're ignorant? Does that not imply there's a knower there? Does it not imply there's a witness of that ignorance? Yeah. That means that witness is still there. So that's the joke. It means you're never not you. You're always you. You can never not be you, because you're always aware of yourself. You're always you're always conscious of yourself. That's all there is to us. It's very simple. Nothing tricky. Not a big experience. Not We're going to get to the last section now. Now, what's a wise person? Okay. So reference guide. Okay, so now let's summarize what is a karma yogi. This is from that Holy Gita reference guide. A real karma yogi is one who understands, A, that his or her concern is with action alone. Turn on the kettle, that's it. Come to class, that's it. That he or she has no concern with results. Okay. That he or she should not entertain the motive of gaining a fixed fruit for a given action. We have established why. And D, that these ideas do not mean that he or she should sit back courting inaction, because then what happens? The ignorance continues. All right, so action is preferred over inaction. So now let's do a fun exercise and come up with all of the funny ideas of what a wise person, a Jivan Mukti, is. What do they look like? How do they speak, walk? Everything, all of the ideas that we have accumulated in the spiritual world. Let's just see what we have, what we come up with. So, assumption. Oops. Assumed reality. So this is the assumed one side and the other one is reality. Okay. So the question goes like this. How does a wise person with knowledge, how do they behave? How do they talk? How do they walk? How do they think? What do they look like? Let's start with what do they look like? Okay.
They have a big beard.
Big beard. I was gonna... White? Long. Okay, cool. Long white beard. All right. Any other ideas? I'm going to look this up.
They can sit in full lotus position.
I thought that too. Where's the lock here? Okay. Lotus. No, that's totally understandable. Like when I saw these pictures of these beings, oh, they got a halo on their head, right? Okay. How about this? They are respected by many. Huh? Respected by many.
They have no possessions, they don't ask for anything.
They don't ask for anything? Yeah, very good. Never ask for anything.
They don't have normal jobs.
Right. So very interesting. Not normal job. What
No
else?
plumbers.
Huh?
No plumbers. You know, like a plumber.
Oh.
Tradesman.
Oh, okay.
That's what I mean.
Okay, yeah. Plumber.
Working in the office?
Plumber, no. They work in an office?
No, not.
They don't. Okay, well, plumber, office. Okay, normal job. They speak slow.
Yeah.
Osho.
They're blissed out.
Osho. Oh, no, when I write that? It's not nice to write names. I guess so. Blissed out and slow talk. How about they know everything? Yeah. Know everything?
They have an aura around them and are
Yeah, aura.
all really always positive, never have anything negative to say.
Right, good one, very good. Aura, always positive. Like outlook. Or, yeah, okay.
Yeah. People throw themselves at them.
Yeah, that was a good one. Throw,
Emotion. Yeah, lots of
thrown at. What else?
They're calm in any
Yeah,
situation.
that's right. They're emotionally stable.
Emotionally
Yeah, that's a good one. Emotionally stable. They
wear a lot of robes.
yeah.
They're not big on pants.
Robes, any colors? Orange.
White.
Robes. Orange. Comma white.
That Tibetan red colour, that particular red.
Yeah, colors. Long hair. They're
Indian.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Always Indian.
They're always Indian. Yeah.
Have to be Indian.
If you're not Indian, forget about it. No choice. Just write off your life, till next time. Okay, how do they think? What their mindset is like? We said kind of a positive outlook. We said they know everything. They never ask for questions.
They're free of thought. They don't have.
Yeah. Free of thought. Always sitting in meditation. Okay, that's enough. So now we have long white beard, lotus halo, respected by many, never asked for anything, not normal jobs, blissed out, slow talk, know everything, or always positive, thrown at, emotionally stable, orange robe, long hair, Indian, free of thoughts, and they're always sitting in a meditation. Okay, so I totally, I can imagine this. I had these same thoughts, and you just don't know. So now let's see what Ishvara says. Let's see what Krishna says. All right. So now Arjuna is, he's heard enough about Karma Yoga. Now Arjuna is really curious because Krishna has obviously described, the wisdom and the knowledge of Brahma Vidya. And now Arjuna says, okay, show me, tell me, how do I identify a Jivan Mukti, a wise person? And so he says, how does a person of unshakable wisdom sit, speak, and walk? And now Krishna replied, such people give up desires and fears, that is samskaras, as they arise in the mind and are happy with themselves alone. Two parts. They give up desires and fears as they, implying what? They're not free of desires and fears. So we can cross, which means obviously they don't know everything because desire and fear is limiting. If I have one desire, I don't have desire for something else. So that pretty much wipes out know everything. And it can't be blissed out because desire implies, well, they can, but not because it's still an impediment on the self. It's a yes and a no. We'll put it that way. So we'll cross out free of thoughts because there's desire. Desire is a thought. Remember, it said the vasana produces a thought, produces an action. Okay, not normal respect. All right. So such people give up desires and fears as they arise in the mind and are happy with themselves alone. With themselves. Wow. Now, who is this themselves? What is that pointing to? Themselves. Is that pointing to the body and the mind? No. Because why? Because the body and the mind is always subject to change. Sore tooth, dull mind. One day it's dull, one day it's so the body mind is never still. It's always changing. So it cannot be referring to what changes. It has to be referring to something that is ever free of changes. They arise as they arise in the mind and are happy with themselves alone. Once again, why are they happy with themselves alone? Because that which never changes is the only refuge which I can put on consistent. It's a dualistic statement. I can put on persistent attention. Let's just say there is abidance in the self as the self, free of the mind. Doesn't mean that there is a freedom of thought, only that the thought is no longer identified as me. See the difference there? It doesn't mean that thoughts go. It doesn't mean that desires and fear, nothing changes. That's the point. Before knowledge, tendencies are there. After knowledge, the same tendencies are there. So we can cross out, certainly, blissed out. Like from day one, I said, which enlightened person did you ever see with a big smile on their face 24/7? Ordinary people. Ordinary people. Yes, there is a contentment, there is a silent contentment, that we know. But blissed out, you see, we have to define what does blissed out mean. Do you mean like emotionally blissed out? Is the self blissed out? No. The self is devoid of any quality. The self just is. It's just awareness of the emotion or condition occurring in the mind. So the blissed out belongs to the mind, not to the self. Okay, so they give up desires and fears as they arise. Why would they give up desires and fears as they arise? Why do they not act on their desires and fears? Because they're happy with themselves alone. And themselves is referring to what? the body and mind? No. To everything. So then, what sense then does it make to put attention on anything specific? Isn't that exclusion? Yeah. So if I put my attention on something specific, then what? Then I'm excluding everything else. So that means a wise person remains happy with themselves alone, because there's an inherent understanding that the I is already free of desire and fear. Desire and fear, clarity and fuzziness belong to a different order of the one same reality called mithya. That which is conscious of desires and fears, conscious of the thought, conscious of the quote blissed out, thought, no thought, that is satya, consciousness. So that means consciousness is always free of whatever occurs in the contents of the mind. We already discussed this with the reflection teaching, with the bucket. Whatever occurs in the bucket, that is the contents of the mind, that which shines illumines the bucket, that which illumines is Atman, or Brahman, same thing, Atman, illumining the contents of the mind. Now we have a little problem with this example, because I just said illumines the bucket implies what? Space, which is a duality, isn't it? So we have a little problem of a language barrier now. We've reached the limits of language. So now, when I say reflected, don't think of it as a sun or consciousness shining at a distance. There is no distance here. Reality is flat. It's when consciousness mixes with the gross body and the subtle body, we call that Atman, or reflected consciousness. You understand? So that means reflected consciousness is exactly the same as original consciousness. We just use a separate label to discern between consciousness that mixes with the gross body and the subtle body, and the consciousness which is free of the mixture, even though there is no difference. Because to say that it's mixed implies what? A substance and something, an attribute. That's not a duality. See, so that's where we kind of reach the limits of language. So there is no mixture of anything here. There's only consciousness appearing as a seeming light, a seeming pillow, a seeming body, a seeming wave. And yet every wave is what? Of the same substance, H2O, water. So there's nothing but water appearing. So it depends on what you identify with. If you identify through the power of your mind with the wave, guess what? There is absolute duality. There is separation. A wave over there is bigger, so I feel smaller. So to feel big, then I look at a small wave and I go, haha, I am so much bigger than a small wave. It's a never-ending cycle. But what? In any one moment, I, the wave, which is non-separate from the ocean, can choose to re-identify with the substance because of which the entire, not only the wave, the ocean, but the entire existence is of consciousness, water. It all depends where you put your attention on. That's why you're always free. Okay. They do not hanker for pleasure and are unaffected by adversity. They don't hanker for pleasure and are unaffected by adversity. So what does this mean? They're not seeking for experiences that are there to add something onto myself. Because if I'm the whole, then how does it make sense to seek for something? Does that not imply that I'm empty? And I have to now go and chase something to fill the void of emptiness? Yeah. They do not hanker for pleasure means they do not go and seek something out of what? And feeling of emptiness. It doesn't mean they don't go out and never have fun. That's irrelevant. We just mean their motivation is not one of the Jivan Mukti, feeling a sense of incompletion, and then to feel complete, and I go and get a, girlfriend or a wife or whatever it is, or money or some kind of experience. So we have to make that distinction very clear. Once again, it doesn't matter what action is performed. The problem comes if that action's motivation is of a lack of, that is emptiness, incomplete. That is a problem. That is a giveaway that there is still something, there's still an identification with what? The body, mind, and intellect. Because only the body, mind, intellect is what is incomplete. It's always incomplete. There's always something missing in your body, mind, and intellect. So obviously it's going to go in search. So that means if the searching is out of satisfying the body, mind, intellect, it implies what? There's still an identification with the body, mind, intellect, which is still not it. So this identification has to slowly go away. And here it says they don't hanker for pleasure because they understand that desire to get, desire to maintain, and the desire to get rid of never last. So what guarantee do you have in permanent satisfaction in hankering for pleasure? It doesn't make sense. So by that understanding, one drops any attempt to gain something in the world out of hopes to get a sense of completion. It doesn't mean they don't still go out there. They're not, it doesn't mean they're just under a tree. They still work. Still, everything's the same. It's just that the intention is, it's not even intention because intention implies the mind. The understanding of reality is different. Which is also another irony because understanding of reality is different implies that reality is different, but nothing really changed. So, nothing really changes, let's put it that way. But at the same time, it does. Yeah, so I have to use the words very carefully because I'm aware if I use something that implies a different dualistic notion. So I have to correct myself. Okay, so they don't hanker for pleasure and are unaffected by adversity. Okay, so it doesn't mean that a house burns down and the Jivan's like, it's just all mithya. It's not like that. It's just that the attachment is gone. So the attachment is what causes pain to adversity because it didn't turn out the way that I wanted. So they're unaffected by adversity. Why? Because there's an understanding. Adversity and all of this world, whether it's joy or adversity, it still belongs to the giver, which I did not create. It belongs to Ishvara. So that means the clarity about what is changes. I could say relationship changes, but that's kind of a tricky word because relationship implies before and after. You see? So it's not really before and after. It's everything's the same as before, as it always was, just there's a clarity about what is. Yeah. Okay. Nor do they become elated when their desires are satisfied or depressed when they aren't. $1 million, great. I lost $1 million, okay. I mean, I don't know, it kind of sucks, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why it happened, but it did happen. Why? Because there is nothing but intelligence here. And it had to happen, and it couldn't happen any other way. Why? Because there's so many variables that are beyond my control that it doesn't make sense now to go and justify how I am unlucky. I have no idea why I lost $1 million. No idea. In fact, maybe that was the best thing that's ever happened so that the person can move on. In fact, one time, half of my company was duplicated by somebody else, and they took the main product, and I try to convince the authorities that it's my product, and they didn't believe it because he did such a good job of replicating it, and that cut the business in half, the income. And that was the best. I was like, great, like literally, I was just like, great, it's fine. I don't know why it happened. I don't know why I deserve this, but obviously I did. I don't know why now. A year, about 5 or 6 or 10 months later, it was the best thing that ever happened because the business is be taking all my time, preventing me from studying. If that would have not happened, I would not be here right now. You see? So there's always variables that we are not aware of, which are always in harmony if you put your trust with helping you to move forward. Yeah. So that's what it means, unaffected by adversity. Nor do they become elated when desires are satisfied or depressed when they aren't. Why? Because everything's changing. So what? So what? Inflation is going to cut it all down in a couple of years, 10 or 15 years. Where's the celebration then? So there's a neutrality. It doesn't mean they don't celebrate. It just means there's a neutrality about whatever happens. Yeah. So this is important because we need to get rid of these ideas what an enlightened person is. We think they're always happy, always joyful, and free of problems, and everything's just rainbows and moonshine, and everyone's coming to their feet, and they're super intelligent, and they know every. It's just it's ideas picked up in the spiritual world which we have to get rid of because those ideas alone can prevent our success. Yeah. Okay. When confronted with sense objects, so the 5 senses, they are able to withdraw their limbs like a turtle. For someone who doesn't feed the senses come back to the self, leaving the longing behind. So this is a very interesting statement. 2 parts. So when confronted with something that is tempting, which happens all the time. For example, Buddha was sitting underneath the tree, and then Mara, it wasn't Maya, it was Mara, I think he said. Mara appeared, and it was, I think, 3 women, seductresses, and he remained completely still, completely stable. So it's an example of the statement where when confronted with these sense objects, they're able to withdraw their limbs like a turtle. Where? Back to the self. What do we say at the beginning? They are satisfied with themselves alone. So then what sense does it make to suddenly go and externalize the mind towards a sense gratifying object? It doesn't. Because the bliss of the self is so beautiful that it's like there's nothing better, there's nothing higher than awareness. So re-identifying with awareness, I am awareness, then how does it make sense to go, oh, I am this emotion? Where's the because this emotion depends on my awareness. So that's why it says they come back to the self who doesn't feed the senses. You see, it's an automatic, obviously implying what? Practice. It's not a one-off. It's not one night like this one. It doesn't work like that. It's practice. Look at Ramana. You think what? You think he just had an epiphany of dramatizing his death, and then suddenly it's all? No, 10 years in the cave, contemplating. Nisargadatta, how long did he say he heard from a teacher, stay in the I am? How many years did he do that for? A long time. Practice, constant practice. So, and this is a very interesting statement because it says the senses come back to the self. So, whenever joy is experienced, that joy, whatever it is, that joy is coming from, with the help of Ishvara, of course. That joy is joy of self, of yourself. That is self-joy, consciousness. So by placing my attention and attributing that joy to an object, what am I doing? I am ignoring the original source. So that means if I understand, despite this object, which is non-separate from me, but I turn my attention what? Back to the one because of whom this joy is known, then what does that do? The senses, the mind has no choice but to turn in on itself. This is what Ramana very beautifully puts. And the only reason it doesn't happen is because we are so used to placing our joy to objects without inquiring from then on. We just say, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, such a pleasant experience. Oh, I love it. It's all out, out, out. Negating or neglecting the source from which or because of which that joy is possible in the first place. So that means by redirecting my attention through contemplation back onto myself, I am the joy. Then what? The senses automatically have no choice but to revert back onto the self. It takes practice. You see? So once again, it's not one and then another. It's just constant effort. Someone who doesn't feed the senses come back to the self, leaving the longing behind. Longing of an object is painful. Because now, let's say I see something that's very fast. I see a holiday. And now I walk away, and then what happens? Now I'm longing for that holiday, that beautiful Palm Beach, with the umbrella sticking out, on the beach. And I'm like, oh, I could have a little bit of that. Why not? So that's going to remain in the mind. And that longing is actually what? It's implying what? I'm incomplete. So I have to now obtain that object to complete myself. And guess what? If I do obtain that object, as I will through my free will, you think that joy is going to be equal to the amount of joy that I fantasized? Never. The joy fantasized is always greater than the actual joy experienced. And therefore, guess what happens? Disappointment. Yeah. And then what happens? And then I go, oh, I'm not good enough. And then I go back and I try to improve myself to get a better holiday. You're just back to the whirlpool of samsara, basically. So the point is reversing the attention back on the self through inquiry. Because of what is this? It's not even a question. It's not even a linguistic question, because that still it requires the mind. One level closer of contemplation, it would be a feeling. Okay, it's like just feeling into from what is this joy of. And then it's not even a feeling, because even a feeling depends on the mind and the intellect. It's just me, awareness. You see, so we have to do it layer by layer. First ask through a linguistic approach, and then get a feeling for it, and then don't even bother with the feeling, just remain as the self. Yeah. All right. Because, see, inquiry is not just about asking questions, who is the witness of this, or to whom is this appearing? It's not just linguistics. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of being. It's a way of understanding. It's a lifestyle. Huh?
It's a way of being.
It's a way of being. Yeah. It's a way. I can put it close to a way of being. But even that is negated eventually. It's as a preliminary, because eventually, it implies what? There's still a door left that's inquiring. And that door has to eventually also be understood as non-separate from me, so there's no need to do the inquiry. Yeah. So it's a stage-by-stage process. But we start off by asking questions verbally, because it's a very easy way to get the mind working, to inquire around this experience, and then to get a sense of it. And then, even the sense is not really required, because if I ask you, do you have to exist right now? Like, can you help your existence? Do you have to right now do something to exist? You see, you're totally innocent to your existence. That's what I mean. You don't even have to be. You just are. All the time. So it's accepting your are-ness, your beingness. And there's nothing other than that. Just accepting there's nothing other than my beingness. And that's fine. And let the desires still go. Let them still, come. Let the thoughts still come. It doesn't matter because it doesn't touch my beingness. It doesn't touch my armness. It doesn't touch my existence. I continue existing despite the desires and fears and thoughts and emotions and endless waves of, fascinating glows and rainbows and sunshines and friendships and everything else occurring. It's never going to stop until the day you die. So this is not about eliminating. This is not about adding. This is not about replacing. It's simply remaining what you already are. What you cannot help yourself but what you already are. You cannot help yourself but to be you. Remaining in that you-ness. That you-ness that I am. When you say I am, that's Atman. That's Brahman. That's it. That consciousness. There's nothing afterwards. My teacher very succinctly put, the bus stops here. There's nothing after awareness. That was it. That stopped the journey for me. I was like, oh, thanks. I thought it was more because dualistic ways are always there's always something more. But if someone just tells you there's nothing behind you watching you. You're watching yourself. You're watching your body, but you're not even watching yourself. You just are yourself. Watching, experience, which is non-separate from you. And you cannot help it, can you? No, you're totally innocent to just being you. So that's what I mean, accepting what you already are, what you already have. There's nothing that anyone can give you because you're just innocent to your existence. Yeah, accepting yourself. That's what it comes down to. So all Vedanta does is removing these false notions which prevent us from accepting that it's that simple. It's got to be more complex. What about all of these books in libraries and Upanishads and Bhagavad? It's got to be... No! It's the simplest thing. If it's something complicated, it's not it. Because that's the mind. If it's not something that even a 2 or 5-year-old child or 6-year-old child can know about, it's not it. See, everyone knows they exist. Everyone knows you're just alive. Your feeling of aliveness. That's it. Period. All right. Let me see what other notes we have here. Okay, so we're going to close soon. Notice that Krishna is not giving Arjuna, because Arjuna says, how do they sit, speak, and walk? We do not say a single word about their physical appearance. Did you notice that? White beard, slow talk, big talk, nothing. Zero. That means behavior cannot tell anything. Why? What did I say at the beginning? Your tendencies still continue like they always did. That means if you were, a fast talker, you're still a fast talker. If you were unpleasant, still unpleasant. and people go, no, that's not. No, it's got nothing to do with that. It's an understanding of knowledge. It's knowledge. So it says here that Krishna is not giving behavior or physical description, but only a state of mind. That's all there is to this. A state of mind which we just discussed. Okay. How to give up lower desires? We talked about this and we said having a nobler, a bigger vision, like worshipping something that constantly reminds us of the divinity, the unity of all things. Okay, and this is just, as I said, we can put our attention on the object and we can put our attention on that one who is conscious of that object. That is the subject and the object. Okay. Eventually this subject and object, that's going to go because that's another separation, you see. I am witnessing an object there and I am over here and that's mithya. No, it doesn't, because that's another association with the body, you see. So that's going to slowly through knowledge disappear, this whole subject object separation. All right, so we can close and oh my goodness, this is more knowledge about what a wise person is. the fruit of self-knowledge. So we're going to discuss this next week in detail. So we can cross out most of these. Lotus, halo, respected by many, never ask for anything. Right? You can only know yourself, but you cannot know knowledge relative. Right? That's only Ishvara knows everything. Just to clear that up. Blissed out, slow talk, aura, always positive outlook, no. Thrown at, definitely not. Emotionally stable. This one is very close, yeah. Because Karma Yoga is about emotional stability, tranquil mind. So I will give this one a tick. In fact, 3 ticks, because it's very important. Robes, orange, long hair, no. Indian, no, because see, that's still the body-mind. It's got nothing to do with awareness. Always sitting in meditation, no. Although meditation can lead to an emotionally stable mind. We're going to talk, there's a chapter 6, the Gita, what is meditation. And we're going to finish the rest of the side next week. Okay. Together. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.